Hello once again. I'm Pastor John Carlo, Senior Pastor, Christian Pentecostal Church of Staten Island. And we've been studying the baptism of the Holy Spirit and how it affected the early church and how it affects church today. We've been talking about various people that were prior to the Spirit of God coming into them and dwelling in them, and the baptism of the Holy Spirit were afraid. And now all of a sudden, they've become totally different people. Let's take a look in the 11th chapter of the book of Acts at an amazing example that's very, very important to us who are not born Jewish. It seems that we're told that there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius. He was a Roman centurion, and apparently he probably had close ties with the Pharisees and Sadducees, because he feared God, the Bible tells us. He knew about God, and all his house, he gave much alms to people. He prayed to God all the time. And this is interesting because he's a Roman centurion. And while he's praying, he sees a vision in the 9th hour of the day, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it says, an angel of God coming into him and calling him by name, Cornelius, right? And when he looked at him, he was afraid. What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, thy prayers and thine alms have come up as a memorial before God. This is a beautiful testimony also about people who seem to be outside, but God knows all about them, and he wants to bring them closer to him. And we see that the Lord tells him to send to Joppa, which is another city nearby, and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. And he even gives him the address. He lodges with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel spake unto Cornelius, he was departed. And he called 2 of his household servants to go to the place to find out what he should do. And when he had told them all the things that had happened, he sent them to Joppa. On the next day, they drew near to their journey, and they got to the city, and Peter went up on the housetop, right, to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made the food ready, he fell into a trance. And he saw heaven open, and a certain vessel descending unto him, and it had a great sheet knit at 4 corners, and it was let down to the earth. This is interesting. Wherein all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, could be beasts and creeping things and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to say to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Now this may sound like, what does this have to do with the Holy Spirit? But here God is teaching Peter a lesson. Remember, the Jewish people did not eat with anyone except their own people. They had foods they couldn't eat and foods they could eat and so on. They were very careful about all these type of things. But it really wasn't about food, this whole thing that Peter is experiencing. He's setting Peter up for something that had never happened before in the New Testament. And again, 3 times he's told the same thing. And then the vessel was raised up into heaven. And now Peter it says he doubted in himself what this vision had been, what it should mean. What is this all about? Imagine getting a vision from God in a strange way and you don't get the answer to it. And at the same time, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius came to Simon's house and stood outside the gate. And they called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, was living there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Holy Spirit said to him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Wow. Then Peter went down with the men which were sent by Cornelius, and said, behold, I am he who you seek. What is the cause, therefore? Why are you here? And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews. was warned from God by a holy angel to send for you into your house and to hear words of thee. You see how God works, how the Holy Spirit works? Something's happening in one place, in another place there's something else, and God brings it together for a purpose. And here they go. Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied them. I guess he wanted to have witnesses that he was going into the house of a centurion, a Roman soldier. And for a Jewish person to do that, this would be very, very wrong. Not only because he was a Roman, but they assumed he wasn't a Jewish person. And it says Cornelius was waiting for them. And he had brought together his kinsmen, his family, and also his friends. Imagine you go to see one person and the whole place is loaded with people. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. He knew this was a special man, and he knew this was a special time. But Peter took him up and saying, "Stand up, I myself also am a man. You can't worship me. I'm not to be worshipped." And he talked to him, and he went in and he found many that were come together. And he said unto them, "Ye know that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto another nation people. But God had showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean." Now he realizes the meaning of the vision that he saw about the unclean animals. And now the Jews would look at people as unclean people. But now God is sending him there for a purpose and a reason. "Therefore I come unto you without gainsaying, or as soon as I was sent for. I didn't wait. I asked therefore, what intent have you sent me for? Why am I here?" He asked Cornelius. And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, and in the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing. And he said, "Cornelius, thou have heard your prayer, and thine alms had in remembrance in the sight of God." He was helping people who were poor. He was a good man, doing good things. But he was missing out on something important, and he knew it. And Cornelius goes on to say how the angel told him where to go, where you were, to your house, and invite you to come here. And of course, Peter's thinking the same thing. God is telling him to go somewhere he should not go, according to the Jewish faith. And then he goes on to say, "Now therefore we are all present before God to hear all things that are commanded thee of God." This man not only was looking for his family to find the Messiah, but his friends. Then Peter opened his mouth and he says, "Of a truth I receive that God is no respecter of persons." Peter begins to see that the Spirit of God, the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and salvation was not just for the Jews. It was for everyone. But in every nation that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted by him. And we see as Peter is speaking, and he's going through a whole dialogue talking about the Holy Spirit. And he says how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, and went about doing good and healing all that were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. And he tells them that he was witnesses to all these things. And he's telling all of this to Cornelius. And then he tells them about how the Lord was crucified and rose up the 3rd day, and so on. And he goes on to say this, "And he commanded us to preach unto the people and to testify that it is he which is ordained of God, and be the judge of the quick or the alive and the dead." And he talks about a whole bunch of Old Testament situations, what had happened even before Christ came. And in the 44th verse of this chapter it says, "While Peter spake these words, the Holy Spirit fell on all of them which heard the word. Even today, I can never remember a time when I saw all the people that are listening to someone talking about God, every single one of them being hit with the Holy Spirit like this, being filled with the Holy Spirit. They wanted to know more. And the Spirit of God came and fell on all of them. And they of the circumcision, which is Peter, and he had brought some brothers with him, they were amazed, they were astonished. And they couldn't understand that the Holy Spirit was been poured out, this gift, on everybody. Wow. They thought it was just for the Jews. Look at verse 46. For they heard them speak with tongues and magnify God. And Peter then said, can any man forbid the water baptism, that these should be baptized, which have received the Holy Spirit as well as we? And he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord. Then prayed they to him to tarry certain days with them. This is a beautiful example of what happened to the early church. If the Holy Spirit had not come the way he did and empowered them, probably they would have all ended up just fading away. But the Spirit of God provokes us to do things, to say things, to meet people that we shouldn't meet, so to speak, because God doesn't care about the color. He doesn't care about the nationality. He doesn't care about the things that separate people. He's opened the door for everyone to come in. Hold on to this chapter, because later on, when they have a great meeting in Jerusalem, and they're talking about the Gentiles coming into the church, Peter forgets this until Saul or Paul reminds him of what he saw himself in the house of Cornelius, that the gospel and the baptism of the Holy Spirit was for all people. All people. And it's still there today for us. As we continue to study the baptism of the Holy Spirit, we're going to see that in the New Testament, the baptism of the Holy Spirit was always accompanied by tongues, by the tongues that people didn't understand. In some cases they understood, but people who don't speak that language and so on. And always brought a message of truth from God. And we see here how even unbelievers or people who were not part of the Jewish faith, didn't know that much about God, are not only touched, but they're filled with the Holy Spirit and speak in tongues. So we'll be talking a little bit more about this next week. God bless you, and have a blessed new year.